I've been gardening most of my life. Growing up, we had a backyard garden and I sold extra produce at the farmer's market. But even with that experience, my approach to gardening has changed a lot. Looking back, it wasn't just trial and error that shaped me, but a handful of books that changed the way I see the land, the food I grow, and what gardening is all about to me. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the gardening and gardening adjacent books that really shaped how I garden and think about my place in this ecosystem more broadly. I'll start with the beginner books if you're just starting off gardening, the ones you should focus on, but then other ones that you can dig deeper and deeper into ecology, agriculture, and your community. The first book on my list is Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew. It is a great gateway book into gardening if you're just starting out, and even if you're a more seasoned grower and wanting to think a little bit differently about your layout. As the name implies, it's all about thinking about at the square foot level. The basic garden bed in this book is a 4x4 and then broken out into 1 foot squares, so 16 squares total. And just thinking differently about how you can plant. Growing up gardening, we always grow straight in rows, one plant after another, and then had the spacing in between the rows, the type of thing that you see on a seed packet. But in this book, that's more geared towards your backyard gardener who's going to be growing in a raised bed. So it's a great place to start to learn about spacing, how densely packing things in can help on both watering and weeding. So if you're just starting off gardening, look into that book, and I even regularly look up online the spacing that they recommend for certain plants as I'm planting out my beds. Now the next book on my list, Mini Farming, subtitle Self-Sufficiency on 1/4 of an Acre or Less by Brett Markham, is a phenomenal book. Now that book breaks you out of your standard size raised bed into longer raised beds, rows, and sort of transitioning the square foot gardening into a much larger and productive space. This book was very appealing to me in starting my garden here when I moved, because that's what I wanted. I wanted self-sufficiency on 1/4 of an acre or less. So it really digs into how can you maximize the space and produce the most calories per square foot, looking at economical ways to amend your soil, how to think about soil amendments. It's a really, really good book for someone wanting to take that next step in gardening outside of your standard raised bed, and growing as much food as possible with the least amount of effort. One of the things that I always go back to in this book in particular is the fertilizing regimens and how they recommend using different things for nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, all natural organic sources and amending. And that is something that I've looked to every single year as I'm working on my garden. So very, very good book for someone who is expanding outside of the realm of the raised bed and wanting to grow more and more in whatever context that they're growing in. Now this next section of books are ones that shifted my thinking away from just maximum productivity in the garden and really tending to the soil, not necessarily the plants. Now, the book that I recommend the most as I'm online talking to people and they're asking questions is the Living Soil Handbook by Jesse Frost. Now this one is great for me because Jesse lives in Kentucky, so all the stuff that he's talking about I know works in my context, but it's going to work for a lot of people. Now Jesse is a market gardener, so growing to sell at farmers markets, so a lot of his stuff is on a bigger scale, but my garden is on the bigger side of a backyard garden. So I like his approach to cover cropping, to no-till, minimal disturbance of the soil, keeping plants in the ground. Chapter on compost and the different types of compost. Did you know that there were different types of compost? This is a really, really good book for those wanting to maybe start verging on market garden scale gardening, but even the stuff that he talks about does translate still to raised bed gardening. So if you want to be growing more in the ground or just learn more about soil ecology and how you can foster that in your gardening, it's a phenomenal book. So definitely check it out. And also, Jesse has a awesome podcast or series of podcasts that he's either done directly or been a part of, the No-Till Market Gardener podcast. Very, very good. Again, geared towards market gardeners, but even if you're interested vaguely in agriculture, definitely check them out. And he's been doing a series that's a daily, Monday through Friday, for over a year now, and they're great. I love his humor, his dad jokes. Next on the list would be Restoring Agriculture by Mark Shepard. And this was the first sort of foray into the idea of permaculture, but permaculture on a larger scale, stepping away from a backyard food forest into a more integrated system and thinking not about harvesting, crops in 90 days, 120 days, but in a decade, creating systems of perennial crops for the long term. It was a phenomenal book that really shifted my thinking of gardening and the systems that we could create that replicate nature and lean into the lessons of nature, of having multi-tiered systems of your big trees, maybe your chestnuts or walnuts, and then understory production, especially in the first few years as those trees are growing, how to do integrated grazing, and how to create multi-dynamic systems that operate more like an ecosystem rather than a traditional farm field. Now, growing up gardening, my focus was always on foods that I could eat. Had zero interest in flowers. But I was also a nature lover. Loved animals. I have a degree in ecology. But I kind of separated those two things of garden and natural space. A book that started to change my thinking was Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy. If you are interested in preserving the natural world for future generations, for stopping ecological collapse and turning your property, if you're so fortunate to own your own little piece of land, but even there's things that renters can do as well, in turning that into a place where insects and animals want to thrive. This is a great book. It breaks down all of the ways that the modern lawn is horrible and how we can start shifting our thinking into creating places where people and animals thrive. So it is just a great book and changed how I think about this garden and a separation of wild space and garden space, and bringing in more native perennials into the garden and surrounding the garden and creating a whole habitat that isn't clearly defined of this is garden, this is wild space, the two shall not meet. Definitely check out this book. Doug Tallamy's work is phenomenal and really started to get me to think differently about the plant choices that I make on my property. Now, as I'm incorporating more native plants into and around my garden, it got me thinking about, well, what native plants can I eat? What's already popping up in my yard that is edible that we may consider to be a weed? So my next book is an excellent resource for that. If you're looking for a field guide on edible wild plants, the Field Guide to Edible Wild Plants by Samuel Thayer is the penultimate book. It's the best book out there. Don't even consider purchasing another book. His book provides you everything you need of how to ID the individual plants, giving notes on what to be wary of if there might be something that could potentially look like it that is harmful or poisonous. So he kind of ranks how easily it is to identify, gives you all the features you need there, tells you about what habitat you can find that plant in, the different parts that are edible and usable from the plant, how to prepare those, conservation notes, everything. Reading the book, I've flagged so many things in the book that I already have either growing on my property that I previously would have considered to be a weed, but are some of the most nutritious things that I could be eating, like lamb's quarters, or the fact that I could bring in plants that are native plants, like cutleaf coneflower that I have started in my yard, that makes a wild edible green. So again, blending the line of these plants are from me and these plants are for the animals, and understanding that, I'm an animal too, existing in this ecosystem that I'm a part of. So it's an excellent book for anybody who wants to get into foraging, whether that be out in the wild or even in your backyard. And lastly on my list is a book that definitely strays away from a gardening book. But it talks about gardening, it talks about agriculture, and it's from one of my absolute favorite authors. The book is The Art of the Commonplace by Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry doesn't write gardening manuals. He writes about land, work, and limits. And that's exactly why it struck with me, a broader context of how agriculture integrates with community and is a connection to land. His writing reminds me that caring about land is more than efficiency and what you can produce, but about restraint, about knowing your place and remembering that productivity isn't the only thing that matters. The Art of the Commonplace is a collection of essays on place, community, agriculture, and the limits, all rooted in Kentucky farm life and agrarian thought. It talks about localism, land stewardship, and a care of place. There are numerous critiques about economics, land, our social structure, and how industrial agriculture is not only ruining the environment, but a greater context of society. His writing is phenomenal, and just reading some of his work, it feels like it was written yesterday, but he's been writing these sort of prophetic thoughts for decades, since the 60s. So I cannot recommend more a book for anybody who's wanting a broader context of place and environment from someone who has truly worked the land, walked the walk. It's not only talking the talk. Wendell Berry is one of my absolute favorite authors, and one that I recommend for anybody who's interested in land stewardship and having a greater connection to place and community. If you have a gardening book that you love, it can be a strict how-to book or something more philosophical, please leave it in a comment down below. I know I would love to hear about it. Others would like to hear about it because it bridges the gap of two things that I love: reading and gardening. Thank you very much. My name is Tyler Lloyd, and I wish you the very best. Until next time, happy gardening.